Welcome to Journeys into Enlightenment with Janet. Join Janet and her friends as they gather at the intersection of consciousness and self-experience, what being consciousness in human form is all about. Access heart-centered awareness with them and feel the difference in the moment that will last a lifetime.
Hello and welcome to Journeys into Enlightenment with Janet. I'm your host, Janet Barrett. It is a pleasure to be here with you. In every episode, I am considering what I sense in energies around us that could use some clarity or fresh viewpoint or just some appreciation to help us all open up to the wonder that is life. This episode, we are going to be noticing and feeling how we consider death. Be open to the sense of shift by the time we are done here about our subject. To me, it seemed like an area that could use some support and an invitation to be present with what any of us are holding deep inside about it. It seems to be one of those things we can have deep aversions to. I'm calling this episode 11, Consciousness and the Grace to be Found in Dying. I am joined by my friend Bud Jahn. He is great for this conversation about something that we will all face at some time, and perhaps many times. Death can be very rude and violent. It can also be wanted and come at a time where it is not feared or anything other than a conclusion of what has been known and lived. It can be held as a reward or as a blessing to be once again with missed others. Our connection to others can hold us captive in the moments of distress as we mark the transition of what is into what was for them and us. We will look to explore the beauty of the spirit in transition, the calamity of emotions and feelings from all those involved, and what happens when resistance gives way, transcending into the delight of sharing in the humanity and spirit present. So just relax. Notice any tension present to the word death and just let it be present. It will help you to really appreciate your next breath and heartbeat. What is it to feel easier, less anxiety, maybe less hurt by death? What is it like to sit with someone in transition and hold their hand and be present and witness for them in those moments of being together? That's right. Just breathe and feel your incredible connection to the other. Bud does this as a hospice and respite volunteer all the time. When he described for me the absolute care in these moments, I was so present to the wonder of life for all. I found myself in tears. It was quite a gift. That is the grace to be found in dying, the wonder of life. There are no words that stand out in our sharing about death this episode. Any words are too small. Tom's meditation this week is Death and Life from his extensive meditation archive at Interlude, an internet retreat.
Death and life. Precious life slips and falls between our grasping fingers. It holds us in its sway for a few short moments, ticks on the cosmic clock. We are gone, or our beloved is gone, and someone weeps. Over there somewhere another life begins. The clock ticks, and it all starts over. We materially advanced Westerners have few guideposts for managing our experiences with death. We gape at it on the movie screen, images spiced with explosions, smoke, and flame, with short takes and quick cuts, but we rarely look it in the face, never see it with unblinking eyes. We eat meat killed conveniently out of sight. Our executions are behind high prison walls. We turn away from the squashed possum on the road, Our families give up their last breath all too often in hospitals that are to the spirit as a vacuum is to air. Some of us allow our nation's children to carry guns and shoot each other down in the street as we sit idly by, insulated by newsprint and video. Safely quarantined from death, we let it titillate us on screens and in books. But do we know what to do when we encounter it for real? We know how to cry for our dead pet. We pay homage to the rare dead elder, all made up in Sunday best, laying stiff but pretty in the open coffin. But these experiences are thrust upon us unwillingly, and we retreat from them as soon as we can. But what if we really concentrated on the change that is death? How would we be different if we could look at death with clear eyes, see it for its mystery and grotesqueness? How much more would we appreciate life if we were not afraid to examine the alternative to it? Most of us grasp at life, holding it tightly so that we don't lose it. In grasping, we fail to relax and enjoy the life that we so much fear losing. We need to realize that all is impermanent. We all go sometime, so it's prudent to be prepared for the moment of transition. At the same time, consider that those whom you love will be gone sometime too. Maybe before you, maybe after you, but there will be separation. That means live life with fullness. Just be in your life. Be aware. Be mindful. Be fearless. Be compassionate. Love. Share. Forgive. Look around at those you share air with. Think of your family and friends. How would you respond if these individuals were gone for good? How can you prepare yourself for the loss? What has been left unsaid? What has been left undone? What amends would you regret not making? What can you do now to bring a greater sense of completion to your life?
I'm going to include a warning here. I pre-record my conversations and then build episodes around them later. Only after listening to our recording of this conversation a few months later, did I notice that towards the end, I hear myself using the word shitty a couple of times when articulating an awareness. I don't really apologize because I don't edit too much what I hear from within when I'm doing in my state of work. I trust that giving voice to words that others are presenting is being honest to that moment and about the rawness of our thoughts and not the vulgarity for the thrill of it. I met Bud a couple of years ago at Matrix Energetics seminar for a few moments, or maybe it was another friend's house. Funny how those details slip away when they're not important. It was just one of those moments in a day filled with lots of moments when one is in a seminar state of mind. But it was strong enough connection that unknowingly to me, he enjoyed my other podcast series, Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet, for several years. He was one of our many silent listeners who was no way energetically silent. I did not know that until we finished that series. Let me just say that we are all better off for his being present with us on the cosmic wavelength. He and I have chatted over a few times over the years. When I was putting this podcast together, another friend who remembered him from a conference call we shared said, "You should ask him to be part of this new project. He feels really right for it, Janet." And I am so glad he is. I had to ask him to send me his bio information more than once, which is him in his minimal best. In his world, the details are just stuff, and only being present is what is important, which so much reflects what my being is about and why Bud is so good and how he is with others. I have always found the term body worker to be interesting. That would sound like it's work. What Bud is, he is a body whisperer. He's a certified Alexander technique teacher with Contemporary Alexander School of the Alexander Alliance USA. He has additional trainings in craniosacral, polarity and various energy work, such as living in the illuminated heart with Drovello and matrix energetics, where we connected. All were expanding his intuitive abilities and his appreciations of systems engineering, whether they be rock or body, for he is a retired engineer in the oil industry. He has a deep, deep love of Rumi and the poets who celebrate God laughing, and is an active student of consciousness awareness. And Bud is also unique in other ways. I bet there's not many of us who can say we are raised by 3 families. He is both son and father and lives in the wilds of Alaska. One way he expresses his being is as a hospice volunteer, respite caregiver. His birth mother, Agnes, was a hospice volunteer for over 30 years. He is one of the best people I know to talk about today's subject, consciousness and the grace to be found in dying. We're going to look to explore the beauty of the spirit in transition, the delight in sharing in the humanity present, when resistance gives way. When he described sitting with those close to passing and touching them in connection and massaging their hands, I had to stop and just sit with him and them. It was a powerful and profound state to join him in. Hi, Bud. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Janet. I'm ready to go for this boat. Your listeners probably know about this in a different way, but I'm ready to get in this thing that we float on the river with. It's so easy to get in with you. It's kind of like a ship or a boat. So let's go for that thing.
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you, Pat. It is always a delight to be in the boat with you. So everyone, what Bud's talking about is accessing heart-centered awareness. And that's what this podcast series is about. No matter if you've heard of the other episodes or if this is new to you, what we're looking to is just allow ourselves to be present and to truly experience that. This episode is a container, and what you want to know is that it's all right, and just take a moment to breathe. There we go. That's happening pretty quickly. That feels good. And just relax. And no matter what you're doing or listening to our episode today, just enjoy it and know that we're holding it, that it is very enriching and deepening and life-changing, whether you are noticing that in the moment, because that's how we access and hold reality to be, and consciousness is live and active. So in just noticing the breath, and then notice your heart, and we'll go through this quickly, and then notice your emotions, and you'll have several up and running, and just put them over there. And then we're going into that third meaning of heart, the core essence of all, the boat that Bud was so descriptive of. And just feel yourself in that flow. And right in this moment, and it doesn't matter when you're listening to this, right in this moment, I can feel constriction there. So just notice that if something seems to be a little crunchy or awkward or whatever, and just relax into it. So this is not a matter of direction. This is just a matter of noticing. You don't have to go inward and outward and all those things. Just be present to what you notice, what your senses are telling you, and what your claircognizance is telling you. That which just knows. No validating, no mind. It's just being present with us. And over the next moments, as Bud and I are going to talk about death, whoa, there's that heavy word. You come to realize that with us, death is not heavy. Death is what you make it, like everything else. And what if we could embrace it from a place of, yeah, it's going to happen. How can I do this with grace? And just give into it that way. So let's just notice here, Bud, what you noticing in the moment, sweetie.
I am taken back to childhood when death first started trying to speak with me behind all other apparencies.
Huh. Okay. Tell us more.
Yeah, going to a funeral as a child, there was a juxtaposition of energies there. I don't know what I do. I sense energies, and we had all the people who were feeling not so good about what was going on during a funeral, my grandmother's funeral, and then there was something else there that was curious, and I went, wait a minute, I'm hearing two different things here. I'm hearing the words, I'm seeing the people, I'm seeing all of this and that I've been told, and there's something quite profound going on also at the same time. Just curious.
And what did you notice in those moments? Where did your curiosity take you? And were you conscious of being curious, or is that the adult Bud that realizes it was that?
I was conscious then, but more conscious at later funerals. When I became more conscious, it became very, very, very clear that there were both sides of the stick going on at the same time. There was a regrets and the losses and all the negative emotions, and on the other side of it was this outrageously loud joy going on. I went, what is this going on? This is about age 15, I'd say.
And so that was your friend's release, do you think, at that point?
No, it was
you were tracking?
It was an aunt.
Okay.
Aunt.
That time was an aunt, right?
Yeah. So as things went on, the world, as you know, we're surrounded by such intense beauty, such intense grace that we veil it from ourselves with the way we think. Probably be the easiest way. The way we believe, the way our emotions come up, and this and that. But it's still there. It's still in the background always. So probably the next universe lesson was a series of dreams that I had that I've told you about, we've talked about, where I was being chased by something causing a great deal of fear in me personally. These went on a long time. And then the fears turned into animals, and the animals would capture me, corner me, do this, do that, and all the things that happen in a dream. And finally they just kept repeating. And finally I got to the place of they would catch me and then start devouring. They'd be ripping my entrails out.
Oh my gosh.
Almost every time it was the soft part of my underbelly that they would get a hold of it and rip them out. And so this went on. And then the last one that happened was I realized that this is a communication to me. It isn't just a dream of fear. It's a whole bunch of communication going on. And I was part of being able to observe, seeing my reaction to it, whatever that means. And what happened was, as soon as that happened, then I realized that this idea of being ripped apart was actually a joyful feeling behind it. And I went, this is too crazy. And I woke up completely angry at myself for waking myself up because I wanted to have the rest of the dream happen.
Well, I don't know, Bud. Once your entrails are ripped out, what else is there?
Well, there's the joy of realizing that this is not the end. I guess.
Okay.
So then the next thing that spoke is Rumi, because that which we seek is seeking us. And so when we get into these states of questioning, of asking the question that we all ask different ways, then the universe does its very best to answer in all of the glorious ways that it has to talk to us. And this time it used Rumi. And you have the poem handy there. Do you want to try it? You want me to read it?
Oh, go ahead. You read that. That'll be lovely.
Let me drag it up. Sorry, I was on another piece there. So that I was getting my attention brought to this issue over and over again in different ways, but this is one of the more fun ways it was happening. There were some close calls with death, and then I realized that I was more than just dying, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And
well, before you pull that up,
yep.
Listeners, so Bud is bringing us all this information that might be matching in you. He's talking about being a child and witnessing his grandmother's death, being present at his grandmother's funeral, and noticing how you can have more than one sense going. You can feel your grief, you can feel the grief of those around you, or whatever those emotions, because a lot of times people are not just grieving, they're angry and they're all kinds of things. Their unresolved energy is present. And as a child, certainly, we're going to be perhaps more aware of it because we don't have the blocks up yet. We don't have the social faces on. And then underlying that, over the years, he became aware of the two different states of where there was a great joy. There was a sense of release. And then what do we do with that? And how do we organize that? And over time, his experience has taken him to gather this body of knowledge that he has. So he's taken a natural state of awareness as a child, and now he's learned how to navigate it. And that may be for you too. So just notice how you react to the words dying and having your entrails pulled out of you, and an unexpected place to go. and the truth of, and that's the fun in this, see, right? Because you would go, what? And it's like, oh yeah, transformation can feel like that at times. Knowledge can feel like that at times. Awareness can feel like that at times. And so we appreciate you sharing, Bud. So, okay, give us Rumi. Let's see what he's got to say.
Okay, so after waking up from this series of dreams about getting killed, I guess, or dying or whatever it was, I run into this poem. It jumped out at me, I suppose you'd say. This is it. This place is a dream. Only a sleeper considers it real. Then death comes like dawn, and you wake up laughing at what you thought was your grief. You see the precision in that about what was happening to me? I woke up laughing at what I thought was my grief.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so that begat the next question. The next question is, how do I wake up without having to drop my body, without having to die?
Okay, and that's something that's across the ages, isn't it?
Absolutely.
How to wake up, how to be awakened, and be present and be alive. Right? We hear that from the mystics all the time.
All the time.
That's
the big one.
Yeah, and it's really the shedding of self long enough to hear that consciousness connection, and how to revel in that as your center point and realize that consciousness, that spiritual essence, is there long before the body is there as self. And so we're all tapping into that. So in your work and your familiarity and your comfort, I guess you'd have to say, that you developed with being around people that were transitioning, how did that become a place of curiosity and joy, as opposed to, oh my God, I don't want to get near it, I don't want to talk about it?
That's a really big thing, because I found out in the body work that I do, if you will, that what holds pain or what holds discomfort in place is basically the people are holding something and not allowing the energy to flow through them, the river to flow through them, to use a more common term. And the ways we all do this are so curious. The ideas that we spin up, the beliefs that we spin up to hold in place some sort of a dam against the flow of what is going to flow. The river is going to flow. And all of the justifications and reasoning we do through our self-identification, as you alluded to, you really took it about 2 steps further than most of us can get all of a sudden, which is the shedding of the myself. You call it the self. There's another myself, the thing that I made, the reality that I made. As we learn to shed that piece by piece, doing the body work by muscle, idea by idea come off. When people can let go of the idea that, or the decision or the belief that is actually holding that in place, then you get a release of energy. They release energy through their body that feels so wonderful. That was the stuff I was feeling at the funeral, the release and the feeling of bliss that goes behind it.
I know certainly when my father was passing, he was in a coma for a week, and I could feel the different stages of where, he went into his coma, and then it took like 3 days before I could feel him relax into his body, because in his nature and his being, it was about the fight.
Right.
And then when he did pass 3 or 4 days later, that was the period of bliss, really. Those 3 or 4 days, because he wasn't in a state of resistance. His body was like, okay. And it was just an effortless place that he went into, and such a privilege to be with him for that. And it's all how we organize, how we want to react. The body is going to fight for itself. That's the whole nature of it, to be present, to have form, and to, live to the next moment. That's what life does. And I think the awakening is where we realize that offering resistance as a natural experience is not always helpful. It's a choice. And when you can start to alleviate the resistance, then you start to awaken.
Exactly. It's the same thing at a muscle or a problem level or a dying level. Here's a piece of statement from a good source I like, Esther Hicks. She says, during the death process, there's a source flowing so powerfully at that time, and in the releasing of physical awareness, and therefore in the releasing of activations of resistance. Just what you said. There is the flowing of pure positive energy, and whether you know it or not, you're standing in that stream. This is why when I go sit with a hospice person, I consider it to be a high privilege, because my job is to be there, at best a witness, and see and feel and hear them releasing the resistances that they are. And I know very clearly that I am not there to fix something or change something
or save them,
something, any of that. And when I can let all of that pretense go about what I'm doing there, it is such an incredible gift to be in hospice work and be able to do that, and it's a learning process for me to be able to let go of those needs to do things and just be there.
Okay, I can really feel one of the reasons this popped up for me about dying is that we do have a natural resistance, and then we don't have to have a natural. We can have a more natural response about being in flow. And I can feel that what we're offering our listeners, Bud, is in our boat, we're comfortable with just being. and that the releasing of the doing. And when I was dealing with the hospice people with my dad, and we sat with him 24/7, I had 3 of us rotating through, and we always had a hand on him. He was never alone. And it was, she said, I have never seen anyone in all her years of checking in with people, family that sat with their loved ones. When they may not have been loved ones, they may have just been people they put up with that came with a definition of family or something, you know. And I was so struck by that, because all I could see was the bliss, and knew that if for no other reason of being alive, I was there to be that time with my father and transitioning with him. And I was allowed, he had time to tell me that he was so grateful that it was me who was there and not others.
Yeah.
And so listeners, just feel what it would be like to not be in fear. Because we can be that way with things we don't understand, or our own emotional stories get in the way. And what Bud is sharing is that in letting go of having to try and save them, or to be filled with my own regrets about what I never got an opportunity to say, or whatever, we co-create always. And that individual who maybe now is not in a place to say thank you or hello or share anything other than their comfort in being with you. They may never have been able to say that in their regular, when they were in a different part of their life. But at this point, what it would be like to let go of your story with them. And what happens when we do that? And that this is about grace. This is not about you. This is about a state of grace. This is not about the egotistical you, the self that's trying to control things. It's about accepting that there are things beyond our control, and where the grace is in that. So just notice what it would be like to feel what we feel right in this moment. And it may feel different. It may feel the same. It may stimulate something. It may lead you to a new thought. It may lead you to, why am I listening to this? This isn't what I thought it was. Any of that is appropriate. Just don't fight it, like we're talking about. Give up your resistance to trying to control what you thought something was. And this is where grace is. Warmth, support, non-judgment. This is where love is beyond your definition of it, your expectations of it, your conditions of it. This is just about being. And it's about celebrating with that individual their passage, and putting that into your framework. And hopefully you would know what Bud and I know. And sometimes we come to that. You can hear how it was lots of experiences for Bud. And for me, I've been around very few people that have died. But the 2-3 times that come to mind, the family was so focused on the individual and their relationship to them that they were missing, that the body was, and mind and spirit was still wanting to be present for them, but felt pulled. And it was like we had to give permission to say, everyone will be all right. You've done a magnificent job, whatever that job was, however you felt about it. And it's time to let go. And I had to do that a couple of times, because being outside of the personal story, I was free to do that. And then I would get the call that said, when you left, they left too. And we're always midwifing. And we just have to appreciate those times when we don't necessarily recognize it. So what are you noticing, Bud?
I'm noticing that this has application in dealing with death, and the other thing that I mentioned is it has an application in dealing with the death of our beliefs
Self.
or ideas.
Yeah. It's all stuff transitioning, right?
It's the same thing. It's the same thing again. I have a story. May I? We have time?
Sure. Please, yeah.
Okay, father number 2. I was raised by 3 families
Wow.
because I was such a troublemaker and was so non-compliant and would not see things the way that you're supposed to see things, as we all do. Anyhow, I was working in a tunnel. I was a mining engineer. I was in a tunnel, and I walked out the tunnel. It's 3/4 of a mile to go to the bathroom. And while I was walking back in, I shut my light off because the tunnel's very predictable. It's a 13-foot diameter tunnel. It's lined with wood and steel, and you can walk down the tracks because we have a train that takes the stuff in and out. And I thought I'd shut off my light because I feel comfortable in the dark. I love the dark. So I shut off my light, and I was walking along. About 15 minutes into it, the energy of my second father came flying through the place. I'm not going to describe it very much except to tell you that he was so freaking excited. He was a bit of a renegade, so I think he was breaking the rules, whatever the rules are. And he came and saw me, and he flew through there with such a display of, I'll say, energy, lights, whatever you want to call it, that I was stopped in my tracks, and I went, this is something happening. This just isn't a pipe dream, or this isn't imagination.
So you were in a pipe. Okay.
This is something. Yeah. This isn't a tunnel dream. This is like, what the hell is going on here? And so he showed me 2 or 3 things. He was beyond himself excited. And so that ended very quickly. And I went up back to the face. We continued the shift. And then the next morning I got the call that he had died on the freeway at that time, and he had steered his vehicle off the freeway at rush hour while he was having a massive heart failure. And he steered his way through a construction zone, or the car went through a construction zone, I should say, and he didn't end up hurting anybody except he died. And that was the time. And apparently he came to communicate how much he was thrilled and how much he loved me, all at the same time. It was incredible. So there's that. That got my attention. And I went, was that strange or what? And the material that he left me with is always an open question of, what did that mean? What is that? How beautiful was that?
Wow.
Yeah.
How neat that you were in that space to notice that.
I was put serendipitously in my beautiful way of having luck with things, just at the right place at the right time. So
well, you were returning from the bathroom, and that clearing probably helped.
You sound like a boy now, Tommy.
Everything's in practical terms, right?
Oh my God.
Energy is energy. So, listeners, maybe you've had experiences like Bud has had, or like I've had, or like you've had. You've had your own unique experiences. What would it be like to own them? What would it be like to value your awareness and being in the moment, wherever that moment might be, and consider all the different things that you could get in touch with? And that's one thing that happens as a result of being present and tapping into your intuitive side and being able to notice things and hear things and sense things. So we sense on a physical level, and then we allow those out and it's all the unseen sensing that we do. So, Bud, you described in that instance his joy, and in other people's instances in their transitions. And what comes to mind is, have there been those that didn't feel it that way, that you're aware of?
Oh, yeah. But
Okay.
there's a salient point to this that you brought up so beautifully, and that is when you're talking about letting go of either ideas, beliefs, or a life, whatever, that we are entering into an area that is not known or unknowable, or you can't know any one of those things, because this is past what we can think from our limited experience.
Yeah.
So what I was doing quite literally is Providence was putting me in a place of not knowing. I was in the dark. I was walking in the dark with all of my senses open, and only because of my willingness.
Situation. Yeah, your situation.
Only because of my willingness to let go of my feeling of being in control with my eyesight was I gifted that experience, I believe. Letting go into the unknown. Let the unknown take us. It's quite a ride. Quite the ride.
Well, and that's the absolute truth of it, right? I mean, one of the delights in doing this podcast series is that, and like in my other show, we never knew where we were going to go. We get a topic, we can feel something going on there, and then you just allow yourself to be present to what you notice in the moment. And it always has context. It always has, in the spectrum of what consciousness is, that huge expansive state of awareness, that sometimes roads lead directly and sometimes you wander, and you can go many different places, and we all have a direction, and this is the journey of enlightenment, not the journey to enlightenment. And when you change your focus that way, it allows you to be more present and notice how all of this adds to your life or detracts from your life, or what is going on and how to be in choices. So what else do you notice, Bud?
That's really awesome. That is a microcosm of life itself, because it's the journey. Because if it was the end of the journey, you'd just go jump off a cliff. But what you want to do is to figuratively jump off a cliff of what's known. That's my belief this week. It's going to change with the next series of rocks that I fall into, but this is spoken of in so many different ways. We are surrounded by perfection. There is nothing more beautiful than that which is in the moment, and only in the moment can we access this place that Janet does so well in this boat of heartfelt centeredness.
Thank you. So my question is, for all of us, is that sometimes people reach enlightenment at the end of their journey, right? And they can see how they held off things in their life, and they can be filled with regrets and angers and what ifs and all these kind of considerations. And that if we had the ability, because we don't judge, if we had the ability that we see in hindsight, a choice we could have made different, a choice that took us a certain direction. Because life is a never-ending stream of choices, where sometimes we go ugly into the night. And that's okay too. It's what we get out of the experience in observing it and participating. And it either is going to validate your story or it's going to challenge you, and it's going to take you to the edge of the unknown. And in going to the edge of the unknown and willing to take a leap and realize that I'm okay when what I think I know is no longer under me. It's actually more freeing. Now I'm free to go where I want to go, because we get so earth oriented. And I think that's part of what is definitely in this, Bud, is this earth orientation, that we are nothing without our earth. And the truth is, we are no thing without our earth. And those are two different things. And that the freedom is in being limitless and boundaryless and storyless. And, in a soul's dance and a transition and an in and out, and whether you believe in reincarnation or not, all we do have is this moment. And it's what you do in this moment that makes the difference. And in this moment could be so small that it changes the world. It'll certainly change your world. It can change in the orientation. And being around people that have nothing to lose is really quite a beautiful place to be, because it allows you to be fearless. And you may be feeling lots of fear, but it's how you go through it and how you use it and how you relate to it that's the key here. So just notice. Are you there, Bud?
Yeah, let me close my mouth and speak to you in 100 different ways.
Trying to track all that can be a little exhausting, I imagine.
No, the beauty of silence is when we get to the door, the words don't do anything. We have to step through into a new place, the place of unknowing. And what Janet says, in the moment, that's the definition of all that is, the moment. The moment is all. And from the moment you can choose to go and aim yourself in any direction. It's built from the moment, as long as you don't hang on to the ideas of the past over and over and over and over again.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot to be said for habituated thought. It does keep us anchored. We noticed that in my men's group, where these guys are all pretty impressive wizards, is that in having the habituated thought, that's the storyline, the pattern, whatever it is, it can anchor us. It can center us in a way that, because we're aware of how big the universe is, right? We're aware of how big consciousness is. And we're very familiar with talking about experiencing life in lots of different levels, time, spaces, places. Mm-hmm. And the essence that we are, that we could label you and me, is around the essence that is everything. And it's important to be able to appreciate wherever we find ourselves, I think.
I think you brought up a very good point that I was kind of missing in that, and that is the and. There's always the and of inclusion. So to exclude what we know is only part of it. We need to include what we don't know and include what we do know. And that anchoring is very useful, yeah.
So we've kind of explored the beauty of the spirit in transition, I think, the delight in sharing in the humanity present, and connecting with where resistance gives way. What else might you notice, Bud, that you might want to offer us? For those that maybe are not so comfortable with death or with the process or with just being themselves in this way.
Here is a incredibly beauty thing that can be that people are always concerned about not being able to communicate with the person passing, or they are remorseful about not saying something or this or that. But in the communication that Janet speaks of in the moment, you are seen completely. We are seen in our entirety. These people can be seen by us. And there's a wonderful beauty to reach in through the heart space, via the heart space, and recognize that all the communication is already done. You needn't hold on to the loss of this or that idea of not communicating. That's all.
Yeah, I think, we get into the emotions of connection, right? And the emotions are important because it is how we connect. And we can, in our ability to be empathic nature, our sense of feeling all as one and picking up information everywhere from those around us, we have to sometimes let go of other people's judgments about how we are each experiencing whatever we're experiencing.
Oh, yeah.
And it is not for someone else to say how you need to lose or feel loss or define you. Because one thing that whoever has transitioned or passed over would tell you is that it doesn't matter. I'm a firm believer in that, because that's all this state is about. It's just the way we play the game. And you can look at those loved ones around you who are still present, who are in their emotional states, and offer that that's their emotional state, doesn't have to be your emotional state, and that you can hold yourself to a different truth. And that as you access yourself as consciousness, you can let go of the shallow surface that we all, will populate. I was at a memorial service just last week for an extended family member, and it was very interesting to be with people. And I didn't have a deep stake in it, though. The gal who passed and I had experiences together, but not many. And I was able to see her in a whole different light than what her family was seeing her as. And that's the power in being outside of the framework. So I would offer for all of us, when you're in these kind of situations, to see how in it you are or how observing you are of it. And when you're in that observance place as consciousness, you can see how everyone is right where they're supposed to be, and they get to make their choice for the next moment.
One thing to add perhaps is that's the beauty of the hospice work, is I get to walk in and my whole job is to be myself. And the more authentic I can be myself, the more of a resonance the people going through what they need to go through can have as a bill, as a tone for them to readjust themselves when they're through doing what they're doing. Because we need to experience what we need to experience, and to stop it from being experienced is not particularly helpful. That's letting the river flow. If it's whatever it is, let it flow, let it come through. It's beautiful.
Right. And it's not for us to say what anyone else's journey is, right?
Correct.
And so when you bring your own, let's just be honest shit along, and your shit is what you're viewing them through.
Yep.
That's what they're aware of, whether they can tell you or not, because in those times, I'm sure there's a hypersensitivity of feeling the body and where it's going and where mind is going and where spirit is in an individual. And that in bringing that together for them, and you sitting them with your hand on them and massaging them, and they're feeling that support, non-judgment, warmth of you and what you are accessing, that has got to be maybe what their whole life came down to.
Mm-hmm.
If life was shitty and you're just going to die, and in that last moment you're holding them as their essence, as the wonderful creator that they were. That may have been what that life was all about, was that moment. And I want to, go ahead.
Yeah, I just going to say that there's so many times I've sat with people that the energy around them, around the room, outside, the birds, the animals, everything gets into everything that can see naturalness gets into a beautiful flow. Things get so clear. They are surrounded by so much love, pure positive energy. Nearing that time, it is a joy to sit with somebody who is transitioning.
Thank you, Bud. Wow. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. This has just been, well, you can feel it. And until the next time, bye-bye. Bud enjoys his roomie. He shares with us the following quotes to consider about death. He appreciates that life is flow-oriented, which Rumi articulates so well for us. This place is a dream. Only a sleeper considers it real. Then death comes like dawn, and you wake up laughing at what you thought was your grief. Your task is not to seek for love, but merely to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against it. And this, when you do things from your soul, you feel a river moving in you, a joy. When actions come from another section, the feeling disappears. Wisdom is found in those who appreciate life, especially about death. There is a source flowing so powerfully at that time, and in the releasing of physical awarenesses, and therefore in the releasing of activations of resistance. There is the flowing of pure positive energy, and whether you know it or not, you are standing in that stream. And that's Abraham through Esther Hicks. And we also have life is pleasant, death is peaceful. It's the transition that's troublesome, from the writer Isaac Asimov. And then there is this. It doesn't make a damned bit of difference who wins the war to someone who's dead. Joseph Heller, Catch-22. It seemed like we need some kind of closing statement about death. It's taken us many places this time together here. So I'm going to call it Death is Only Illusion of Final. And let's see what shows up. Wholeness is appreciating that death will happen at some time to us physically, and that is as it should be. We set the length and conditions of our lives by our biases and our physical choices. It means that we understand that death is essential and a vital part of living in the flow of what we experience in the totality of being. We can live in relation to death as denial, resistance, out of sight, out of mind, but not really. That is illusion. Death will register in many ways. It can be a physical death, or it might be of an idea, an ideal, a belief. It is always going to be the end of some illusion about what we thought was important, about what we felt was valuable. It can be abrupt and not planned for, or we can be given notice of it coming up sooner than later. And someone or something might be dead for a long time before we find out about it. It can leave us settled or unsettled. This is illusion. Life is like a Mobius strip. The point where the strip or pattern turns on itself is going to be either life in form or life out of form. That point, which we call birth or death, is a moment of transcendence. The looping in either direction is that time and space of transition one finds in form and out of form. For life in either reality is motion, flow, sense, state. Many have complaints about being in form, about being stuck in a body, being alive. This is illusion. And in the same space, there may be fear of death. This might be a contradiction. It is still illusion. We can have many stories about death, which are illusions of how we think we would want it to be and not as it is. We might like to think someone who has been a miserable person to deal with all of a sudden will see the light of their behavior and repent and pardon and apologize. That is a nice story that can be true or not. We might think in terms of suffering and salvation elusively beyond reach in life, and that is a nice story too. How is death more about us and confronting our own fears and sense of self than it is about the person who is passing from us? Do you catch the hook there? They are not abandoning us. They are on their journey, which you have shared with on your journey. You may have enjoyed that time or not, and maybe only after this part is over does it come into clear view of what was and not what you thought it was. This is illusion. So, I sit. I sit and feel my breath and my opening to heart-centered awareness. I don't hard focus on the breath so much as I let my sensory being be present. Mind is all about construct and story. So, I let my awareness of being more than just human drive and mind to share with me what is present about death as an energy and movement. How am I relating to it? From a gut feeling, a sensation of some sort, a thought, or stories flashing through. All are valid. I can feel what holds my attention and just let it. I don't try to fix or make or think or go into that all-powerful do-something space. There is nothing to do anything with. This is illusion. I just let myself be present with it. No need to let go. Just let it be. In the letting is the lessening of resistance that I might be holding in so many ways, in so many patterns and layers of stories or visions, in my story of illusions. I breathe. I let myself feel emotions or aches and pains as only trapped energy looking to move through that is not yet doing so. We are each in our story, and we are always in our story as we are generating our story. If we are clued in to our beings as much more than what we think we are, we can then be more present to others in their stories and how they might be running in tandem and parallel and crossing over now and then. They are not in the same mind sync as you, which is as it should be because they are them and you are you. But you can have plenty of crossover when you stop your story from running and you can hear them in theirs. That can be one gift that death provides. It stops us in our story often. It clears the decks of belief and false truths and projections and emotions that may have been holding us in their grip for years. Sit with someone dying and just be present. Just be and notice. Sit with someone who has already passed over and just be present and just notice. And then just sit with yourself and just be present. Just be and just notice. If you would like to know more about Bud and all his great stuff he's involved in, he can be reached at Bud, Bud_Jahn, Jahn, at hotmail.com. Thank you for joining me here at Journeys to Enlightenment with Janet. A new episode is released every 2 weeks. Any questions or thoughts or guests you'd like to suggest, you can email me directly at janetandbeyondpodcast@outlook.com. For more information about all the elements that make up each episode, they are on my podcast page at my website, www.janetandbeyond.com. While there, you will also find information about my other podcast show, Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet, and all about my work with clients. You can sign up to receive my regular weekly blog, Life in the Beyond, Journeys into Enlightenment. If you're looking for other regular opportunities to sit in heart-centered awareness with myself and others, you can join us in my Fuzzy Photons playground groups I offer on Thursdays, live interactive space via Zoom video conferencing. You can follow each episode of this podcast series on my YouTube channel, Journeys into Enlightenment with Janet Barrett. Till the next time, notice what feels different right in this moment. It is real, and it can last a lifetime.